Here we are on Trail 4, and we stop and we think through the parts of the core that are who we are as men, and we're pretty comfortable when we kind of work through the brain that thinks or feels, or when we talk in terms of our mind and all the different areas that we look at. It gets a little bit trickier than when we go where we're about to look, and that's at our souls. I mean, deep inside who we are and what we think beyond this world and all of those things, and that's where it gets a little bit tricky. And maybe think about how hard it is for a guy to go there. When I was reading a Newsweek article back in September of 2011, it was an article called Men's Lib, and it was written by Andrew Romano and Tony Ducopel. They were trying to make some points here about how everything was changing from metrosexual, where guys were sort of fitting in and there was like this no line between men and women, to what they call now retrosexual, where guys are just running around and jumping around campfires and trying to prove that they're men and whatever that's all about. And in it, though, they were discussing how things have changed between men and women in our culture. Listen to these couple statements. Men's share of the labor force has declined from 70% in 1945 to less than 50% today. And in the country's biggest cities, young, single, childless women, that is really the next generation of women, right, earn 8% more than their male peers. Women have matched or overtaken men as a percentage of students in college and graduate school, while men have retained the lead in, now listen to this, alcoholism, suicide, homelessness, violence, and criminality. Now, I've read these articles before, and I've heard all the points that are made about how, what the days of where a guy would live in a fraternity during his early college years now extend all the way into the 30s of his life, and how it just doesn't seem like guys jump in. That's not a surprise to me. I think what was surprising to me was this sentence from the article. Listen to this statement. But the gender wars aren't a zero-sum game. When men lose, women and children lose too. Well, that's interesting. When I thought of that, I thought that if men could figure out how to win the war of being a knight, it would ultimately lead, according to that statement, to the peace of the world. It's fascinating that if we stop for a few moments and we think, what is it that is absolutely essential for us as men to deal with? I think we have to say, we have to get this, because for a woman, when a man fails, it changes things. Remember I said that we would talk from time to time about what's it like when a man walks in a room? When a man walks in a room, children should feel safe, women should feel protected, everyone should feel enhanced and ready to grow because they are valued when we do that. And when we think about where we are as men, it doesn't seem like we're there. So I have to submit to you that the picture behind me is really important. If you want to be a warrior, if you truly want to be a warrior, you better get the peace. In fact, what we call this trail is see beyond the battle. If we could simply see beyond the battle that we're in, then we would be able to say, wow, the impact of me being who I am. That takes me back to the soul. It takes me back to the very essence of who you and I are as men. Consider this statement. The warrior listens to the input of his soul, underline it right there in your books, as he honestly assesses his spiritual choices. It's good to review that. You're going to take a look at your soul when you assess the choices you have spiritually, because it's those spiritual choices that say the reason for the battle is worthwhile, and so the battle will ultimately lead to peace. There was a movie that was out a number of years ago about a tragic experience that happened in our country. The movie's called We Are Marshall, and it's about the flight crash of a Marshall's football team. When the crash took place, it was after a loss in November of 1970. On that plane, 75 people will die. 37 players, 5 coaches. Only 13 players from the thundering herd of Marshall will survive because they weren't on the plane. And almost all of those were freshmen. Nate Ruffin was a co-captain, and he was injured and could not make the trip. But the Coach Tully, was killed. One of the other coaches had given up his seat, and he survived, by the name of Red Dawson. It's interesting is all of that takes place. You have to stop for a minute and imagine what happens to a city a town, a college community, when a tragedy like that takes place. It happens in their soul. I want you to think about that as you consider this particular scene. Now, in this scene, what's happening is there are some students that have survived. There's some coaches that have survived. There are people that are alive that feel like they should be dead. It's survival guilt. It's like, why am I here? And you're seeing hearses go by with one hearse stopped at a red light and other hearses traveling by. You see the shocked nature of the town as they pick up the newspaper, the ones that survive, and read about all their friends listed by picture and name. You go to the funeral after funeral, and you watch as a town, as a community, as a college grieves the loss of their own. In the middle of all of this grief, you sometimes just feel like taking the movie and pausing it because it's so overwhelming. Finally, there's a father whose a future daughter-in-law, is next to him at a grave of his son, and he can't take it anymore. And he walks away. I think it's that walk away that is like the walk away of a very soul of a man. It's like he feels like he just can't do it anymore. As that scene comes to an end, it's like we have to regather ourselves. If you think about that scene, and you think about him just, the dad not even being able to deal with life anymore, you know that something's happened in his soul. Soul is spiritual. Soul is deep. We're going to take a few moments and take a look at that as we walk through that particular movie, as well as a bunch of other things to consider the soul as part of who we are. Look with me, if you would, to Roman numeral 1. The warrior depends on his soul. Every warrior has a soul. He depends on it too, and then there's going to be several things you're going to depend on it to do. He depends on it to give him a sense of meaning and motivation. A warrior depends on it to give a sense of meaning and motivation. How do you go on when your friends have died? How do you go on when the things you fought for haven't turned out the way you think they should turn out? We've gone through so many experiences like that in our life. Maybe the most real one is my son's struggle with cancer. We think it's gone, we think it's over, we first discover it, and then we think it's over, and then it comes back, and then he has to kind of be poisoned through the process of chemo, and you kind of go through all of that, and your soul just wants to say, what's the use? Now that's probably more dramatic for us, but you go through that financially, you go through that in relationships, you go through that when you did all that you know how to do with your job and you get fired. You know when you basically did what you knew to do to be right, and you still got in trouble because those you hung out with did what was wrong? Those are soul moments. Moments we say, what's going on? Look at number 2. See, the soul is going to answer the whys that come up from dealing with the forest. As you answer the whys, there's whys, okay, that we have to deal with the forest around us. Something happens to us, it hits us, and we have to say, why? Why did that happen? Why is there no justice? Why did that happen to me? Why not to them? Or why did it happen to them and not me? Whenever I watch a tragedy, whether it's like an earthquake that takes place in Japan or a tsunami that hits Indonesia, or whenever I see something that happens that seems to be on a large scale, I always sit there and go, why? Why? Your soul is what is searching for that answer. Your soul is what will guide you to the answer. You can't ignore your soul. The unfortunate thing is we get so busy that we leave off that part of our core. Guys, there are 6 parts to our core. The soul is one of them. We have to pull that out and examine it on a regular basis to see, where am I in this area? Look at number 3, or look at number 2 underneath this. The questions that why is going to answer is this, underneath number 2. Why am I here? Why am I here? Why me? What's my purpose? Please tell me there's something more to life than this, right? Why am I here? It's going to answer another question. Why am I worthwhile? Why am I worthwhile? So often I think we get struggling as guys about, can I do anything right? And am I loved? Especially you guys that felt like your dad didn't care. That you never heard, I love you, I'm proud of you, this is what you're good at. You never felt like people around you gave you just a one-up. You kind of feel like you were always at the bottom of the barrel. You felt like you were always the kid that wasn't accepted. And you go, why am I worthwhile? Your soul won't let that escape. It'll cause you to keep coming back and asking key questions. There's a reason for that. There's a creator of your soul. Look at another question that we ask. Why should I value others? This is a question I think that takes us to another place in our lives. Why should I value another being when I might not gain anything from them? And even if I gain something, I mean, isn't it really about eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die? Isn't it really about me? Why should I value another person? Your soul is going to answer that question. To ignore your soul is not a good thing. Another question. Why do I do what I do? Doesn't that drive you crazy? Why do I do what I do? You know, to stop and ask yourself that is to look deep inside of who you are. We don't want to do that because I'm not sure we like always the answers. Sometimes the soul is going to reveal the shadow. The shadow that's part of our core that does that which is wrong. Some of it's going to reveal our background. Some of it's going to reveal what we believe. Some of it, though, is going to reveal deep into my heart that causes me as a warrior to say, I have to deal with the soul. So number 3 says this, provide the North Star for his life theme. Do you ever want to get centered in your life? The North Star is, if you're out and you're trying to figure out where do you go from here, what's the next step in my life? North Star is allowing you to find the center so that you just aren't wandering aimlessly about. I think so often we don't let our soul speak, so we follow whatever trend, whatever thing we feel like at any given moment, and we never find our center. Soul is saying, get centered, find out why. Find out the answers to the whys of your life. Look at number 4. Give significance to each decision he makes. The soul is going to give significance to your decisions. It's going to say, is this important? Let me give you an example. I see a hot girl over there. She looks like something that would somehow or another please me. So I will go ahead and pursue her. I will then conquer. Remember my whole thing about how you conquer with permission? I conquer, I engage, I have sex with her, she becomes pregnant, and everything starts to happen, and I go, okay, now I've set this thing on motion. Now in my soul is saying, dude, think this through. Think where you're going. But I can't because everything's being driven so quick and everything's being taken care of by my instincts, by my shadow, instead of me saying, okay, what's valuable, what's important, what am I about to do? And the consequences. Have you ever thought about the consequences of your choices? If I asked you right now to make a list of 5 things you wish you never did, none of us are going to have trouble doing that. There's a bunch of stuff that we go, that one would be, and what that cost, and how that impacted the world around me, and how it's impacted my world right now, how it impacted where I am right now. Some of you right now are under such financial strain, and it's a series of choices. The soul says, help me walk through this. Some of you are sitting literally right now, you're in prison. You're trying to do your time for what the crime that you did or did not do, what you were accused of. And the reality is that you sit there and you go, what is it that caused me to go in that direction? It's these things that the soul asks. Let's look at another one. Another area that the soul looks at and helps us to ask is this. Helps them discover a worthwhile, number 6, life pursuit. If I develop a value system that has love and honesty, a life pursuit will cause me to say, okay, I must have significance. And I tell you that no matter where you are right now, no matter what choices you've made, no matter what you've valued or haven't valued up until this moment in your life, the reality is from this moment on, you get to make good choices and you get to make a difference, especially if you let your soul connect to God and get transformed. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. There's significance of why we're here. I mean, there's a reason. There's something for you and I to do. And we're going to find that life pursuit. The soul will drive you to that. Look at number 7. Explain his need to choose one of 4 faith system options. His soul is going to drive you to say, okay, where am I in my choices? I have a lot of choices regarding God or the lack thereof. I have a lot of choices, and I have to decide which one I believe. There actually, as I can tell, there are 4, as best we can tell. There are 4 of those. Let me look at the first one. If you look at a faith option, life is chance. Probably means there is no God. It probably means that if life is chance, in other words, there's nothing else to be added, that there's no being overseeing it, or at best, no being that cares, but probably no being at all. Matter of fact, everything boils down to chemical. It's a chemical reaction. I just sort of happened into existence, and everything is, we'll see what happens. It's sort of survival of the fittest. Dog eat dog, man on top wins. When I was a kid, we used to play a game called King of the Hill. On King of the Hill, the goal was to stay on top of the hill as long as you could. And it's really interesting because you would use anybody to get to the top of the hill and betray anybody to remain there. It's sort of that sort of survival of the fittest model. What happens is when there is nothing from God, there is no spiritual morality, hey, it's all chemical. Whoever wins, wins. And you just go for it. That's one view. There's another view, and that is life is a series of energy transformations. Sort of the Star Wars kind of thing. There's a series of energy transformations. And I know that you're sitting there and you're going, okay, I'm a little confused on that. But if you think Star Wars, you'll do okay. In Star Wars, remember the Force is with you, Luke? You couldn't see it, you couldn't taste it, you couldn't touch it. It wasn't God, it wasn't any being that you knew of. It was just the aura, the energy around you. And that actually is, you'll see some of that in Eastern religions. You'll see that in certain views that are existence all over the place, where we sort of, there's no being, there's just spiritual power. There's just this thing. Now, the problem again with that is that you and I don't have a relationship that drives us, and so therefore morality just gets really fuzzy. Right? It's just a little close to survival in the fittest, different set of rules, but the same game. There's a third view, and that is that life is created by a God. Life is created by a God. This is basically an account where we have a God who's made us somehow, and we have to find him. It's religion. It's man in pursuit of God. So I'm going to do whatever I think he wants me to do. I hope he likes me. I hope he accepts me. I do this stuff where I try to get to him. Now your soul is saying there's something more out there. It might be, for some of you, it might be life energy, and it might be, hey, there's really nothing but, I sure hope it works out chemically. For many of us, though, it's like it's this religious thing, right? We do these things to get to God. There's actually a fourth view. This is actually my view. It has freed me up tremendously. In fact, my soul is an area that I have a lot more in touch with than I used to. My soul is that which drives me to ask deeper questions because I'm not afraid of the answer because of this conclusion. Look at the fourth position. It goes this way. Life isn't chance. It isn't a series of energy transformations. Life isn't just created by a God. Life is founded on a relationship with the God of the Bible through Christ. That's spirituality. Life is founded on a relationship with the God of the Bible through Christ spiritually. That is the number one thing that has changed me. Now you say, okay, Keith, I'm a little lost. How do we jump from God made us to now you have to have this relationship with Christ through the Bible? Well, see, when God made us, here's the way he made us. Remember the core? Here they are. We have a body. We know that. The Bible talks about that. We all know we have bodies. We have a mind. Obviously, we know that. We have a soul, and I think most people will agree that there's some kind of being, part of a man called a soul. And it's interesting, we also have a spirit. Now, not many of us talk about that, but body, soul, mind, and spirit are all part of who we are. Now, when God made us, he made us that way. Then he added the choice. He said, that's the fifth one, there's this choice, that myself, I can choose how I want to live. Basically what God did is he made the world. He said you can have anything except for this one tree. You can't have that one tree. And the reason he did that wasn't like it wasn't a trick tree. It was basically to see whether we want to have a relationship with him back. He made the world for us. He wanted to have a relationship with us. It's all about relationship, right? It's all about relationship with God. And he says, I want to have a relationship with you. So he makes us that way, and he throws on the choice. He says, you can choose. You have a self. Now here's the problem. The problem is in that choice, in that self, if we choose the wrong thing, something's going to die. Something's going to die. He says, as a matter of fact, if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. Now, not going to die until then. There was a man by the name of Adam and Eve, and they ate from that tree. And when they did, they killed not the decision maker. That was what they did. They killed the spirit. The part of them went dead that was deeply connected to God. It got severed. It got broken. Now the soul didn't get broken. It's still in search of God, but it got broken. In order for now instead of it being the spirit, it was replaced with what we call the shadow or sin. Now we do what's wrong naturally. Never had to teach my kids to be bad. Figured it out all by themselves. That's the way we are. Christ comes and he says, I can beat the impact of sin in your life, and I can make your spirit come alive, and it adds up the sixth dimension of the core. It allows your spirit, you become alive spiritually. I don't know of any other way that can take place. God created us. God wants to be involved in a relationship with us, but it's been broken, and he reconnects it through Christ. It's the only option. That's the option I've taken in my life, and it's changed how I do life. Now, for you, you don't have to take my option. You can do everything we're doing together here and say, you know what, Keith, I think you're full of it. Which you'll not be the first person to ever tell me that. And the reality is that I'm not making you say you do my way. I'm simply telling you the way I do it. What's happened in my life that has brought me back alive. When my spirit came alive through Christ, when I transferred my trust from myself to Christ, it changed so many things. Let me show you another area, number 8. If you and I deal with our soul, if we depend on this soul, it will help us deal with the harsh realities of his inevitable death. Help him deal with the harsh realities of his inevitable death. In the movie First Night, First Night was a fun movie that I watched years ago, and there's this really cool scene, and in that, it's basically this moment where the first knight, who's Lancelot, is fighting this guy in this little town somewhere for money. And he does this move, and he takes the guy's sword away. The guy is enormous. Nobody thinks he's going to win. They think the big guy's going to win, and Lancelot beats him clearly and doesn't do anything but swat him with a sword. Doesn't do any damage. And the guy says to Lancelot, can you teach me to fight like you fight? And Lancelot said, are you willing to die? And the man goes, I'm not sure. And he goes, until then, you can't fight like I fight, because you have to not care about life. Now, Lancelot has actually given up on living, but he actually is toying with the cool part of this whole thing. When you understand that death is inevitable and you stop trying to figure out how not to die, and I'm not trying to figure out that you die, you're trying to figure out how not to die, here's what happens. You say, part of my existence is death, and my soul will help me deal with that inevitability. I'm not afraid of it. Not trying to run from it. I will deal with it. There's actually an invincibility that Lancelot had because of that. Now, he wasn't at that point necessarily in a healthy place. He didn't care whether he lived or died. I think there's an issue that we care whether we live or die. We're just no longer afraid of its inevitability. Your soul is helping you deal with that. Look at number 9 with me, if you would. Number 9 is another area that the soul helps you through. And that's support him through the many life stage transitions. Underline that word, transitions. The soul will help you, support you through many life stage transitions. If you could imagine, your life is a series of trapeze moves. You're swinging on the trapeze, you let go of one thing, you fly through the air and you grab another trapeze. You know that moment? Well, in this journey, as we go back and forth, there are these gaps. They're the transitions of life. Your soul is to help you with your transition. Let me give you one. You are always a child until your mother dies. You are. You're somebody's child, but all of a sudden she's gone, and then all of a sudden you're at a transition point. How do you get through that? Your soul will help you there, because your soul is a God-shaped vacuum placed in you by God that is designed to pull you to him, to seek him, so that you can connect to him and have your spirit come alive and become complete as a man. Look at the last one. Your soul's going to help you seek his true identity and what makes him unique among other men. And there's a part of us, guys, that is a true identity. In other words, what makes us unique, what makes you and I unique from other guys, there's a part of us here that if we build this thing up and we understand it, let the soul do it, we will suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I'm not just trying to avoid death, I'm actually trying to live complete. I go back to the quote from Newsweek when the guys said that men, women, and children were losing because men weren't living. And that's it. I mean, that is everything. If you understand the war, you'll understand the peace. If you understand what you're about, that's what the soul's calling you to do. To your fullness, to your greatest part of who you are as a man. And when we work on that, we'll begin to understand how that flows. Watch these couple points that go underneath 10. God, as creator and designer, has called each man for a specific mission in life. God has called each man for a specific mission. You take God out of the equation, you and I have no idea why we're here. We take him out, and we don't know why we were designed. But if he's in, and if he's the creator, and if he's the designer, and if he cares, then we got to find out what the mission is. And one of the joys you're going to have this year as a warrior is finding out why you're here. Because why you're here is huge. Not just why you're here in a cosmic kind of way, not just a group way, why you're here specifically. What is the dartboard that you throw the darts of your life at? And we'll talk about that. Because there's a calling that God has for you that makes you unique and individual. Look at the second one. Each man is needed for one part of the world, challenges ahead of him. Each man is needed because there are challenges. This world has challenges, and each man's needed for his part in it. Guys, I want you to understand that when something happens that you have nothing to do with, you still actually have a role to play. Your attitude regarding it, your encouragement of others to try to work it out. Sometimes you have everything to do with it. In the movie, We Are Marshall, I want you to think about this particular scene. Nate Ruffian is a young man who survived the airplane crash. There are 12 other players, mostly freshmen. He has just found out that Marshall, because they didn't know what to do after this great tragedy, has canceled the football program. The NCAA will not let freshmen start in football. And so what are they going to do? Their team is dead. Where do they go from here? So as a result of that, their program is dead. Nate Ruffian finds that out. And for such a moment as this, he's called to do something significant. In a student union building, he gets the players together and he sends them on a mission to get the college activated. After he was told by the president, a good man, Don Dedman, that he could not come in to the board meeting and fight for his cause. As he sent these players all out, the next thing you know, there's a knock at the door of the board meeting, and in walks Nate. The president says, "Sir, young man, I told you can't come in and talk. We really, if you want to share with us something, you have to do it at another meeting." And Nate says, "You want to hear from me? I'm not here for you to hear from me. You need to hear from them." And the board members go over to the room, the window of the room, and look down upon the college campus, and there are thousands of students. And they yell, "We are Marshall. We are Marshall." Nate, for such a moment as that, has activated an entire college campus. As you think about that scene, you and I have to think in terms of, what does that mean? We are Marshall, one man. Got everyone saying, "We are Marshall." And the board of directors decided to keep the team. You know, it's at that moment that history gets changed because one man finds out what his mission is. There's another thing that the soul does as you connect to the God that's made us. Look at this one. A man's calling is connected to a specific giftedness. Specific giftedness. I think one of the things that I love about that is there's something that only you can do. I have one son who's a wrestler. He wrestled at Penn State. I have another son who's an amazing soccer player, another son who's an amazing football player. I have another son who's an amazing actor and musician. In every one of those guys' cases, I have a little bit of them in me, but I can't compete at the levels each one of them have competed at. I can't do what they've each done. There's a unique giftedness that they have. Your soul is going to help you identify that and find out there's a purpose why I'm here. There's something free about that. In other words, if you look at the guy sitting right next to you right now, that guy has a reason why he's here. That guy. You look at him and go, "That guy? That guy." And so do you. It's your giftedness. A couple more, under 10. Achievement of his mission and calling demands that the man fulfill his potential. Don't miss out on the opportunity to fulfill your potential. This is always a tricky one for me. I mentioned to you about my dad, and if you did Squire last year, you know a little bit more about my dad. My dad hit this moment where he came to the creator, designer, God, and said, I don't want anything to do with you. My aunt was dying of cancer, and God, he asked God to fix her, and God didn't. She died, and he said, if she dies, I'll never trust God again. She died. He never trusted her again. God trusted God again. He fulfilled his problem. His possibility there. His promise was fulfilled. Unfortunately, it killed his potential. I watched my dad over the next 45 years of his life, 45 years of my life, degenerate. Not that he was just some terrible human being. He just actually lost all of his life luster, all of his reason. Guys, if you deny your soul, you're going to miss out, man, your potential and what you're here for. Look at the last one. The last one says this: God has implanted an inner voice within the man that is congruent with God's call. You will spend your life going, I get it. There's something inside of me. There's something in my inner voice within me that fits within the calling of God. From the very beginning, that calling is very, very unique. Adam and Eve fall. They sin in Genesis, and then they have two children, Cain first and then Abel. One day, they're bringing sacrifices to God, and Cain brings whatever he has, the first fruit of his land, some fruit of his land, kind of brings it to God. But his heart, his soul is not after God. And while Cain is a guy that's a gardener, Cain's a guy that works the ground really well, he misses the opportunity. But in your nightly news, you'll notice that his brother's name is Abel. Abel is this one that, its name stands for like breath of God. And Abel just kind of gets it. So he gives God a sacrifice of a lamb to worship him, and God goes, that's what I'm longing for. Now, it isn't really the lamb, and it isn't really the fruit, it's really the heart, right? It's allowing you to come to the place of, what did God design for me? How did he design for me to truly, truly live? Abel gets that. Cain can't stand it, and as so many men, his warrior kicks in, and he kills his brother Abel. First murder happened in the second generation of humanity. Explains a lot why men do what we do. We just kind of keep that pattern up over and over and over again as we do damage. But Abel does what is right. He gets this sense of what God designed him to be, his voice, his calling. Let me show you a couple other things about the soul that I think will be helpful. Roman numeral 2. The warrior's soul will move him to develop a worldview and establish religious belief patterns. Obviously, we've been talking about religion, we've been talking about all this stuff. You're going to get a worldview, and you're going to get religious patterns that are going to be part of your life if you let your soul help you develop this area. To deny your spiritual side, to deny the potential of your spiritual side, is to be this kind of incomplete man. Can you imagine? I'm just this knight that has a body and a mind, some choices, a couple bad things, but no soul, no shadow. Then there's nothing. I mean, it's every reason why an animal exists, right? There's nothing beyond that. As a result of that, man, life becomes so unfulfilling. It becomes a drudgery. You go punch in the clock, you get done your day, you sit and watch TV until you go to sleep, then you get up the next day, and you repeat the pattern over and over again because life isn't fulfilling. There's no knighthood in that. A lot of spandex, but not a lot of knighthood. So what do we do with this? How does this grow? Well, consider this. Number one, most cultures exhibit a belief in a type of supreme being. If you look around the world, most cultures believe that it's not chemical. It's not some kind of power that's out there, an energy source. Most cultures believe there's some kind of supreme being that's involved. Number two, many cultures form a concept of the afterlife, making death a transition rather than an end. For many of us, we have this view, many of the cultures of the world have this view that there's something beyond life. So again, it's not, we were out with the guys, in fact, my wife and I were climbing up in Colorado one day, and we came across this carcass. There was no burial for it. Nobody took care of it. It was just a carcass of an animal. Probably about the size of a small mountain lion or a wolf or something, and there's just this carcass laying there, not buried, nothing. It was just, it existed. The soul says, it's not all there is. There's more. There's existence beyond that. It's the existence beyond the inevitability of death. Hence, we tend to take death and will honor people more than just leave their bodies lay around. It's that kind of a concept that I think we have to stop every once in a while and say, okay, what is the soul driving for? Consider this, that many cultures also do this. Number 3, many cultures define good and bad behaviors through the viewpoint of their faith system. Many cultures are going to say, we have a moral code. And that moral code that exists because of our faith system. It's what we have in concept. So it's interesting, if I go around the world, it doesn't matter what the background is, it doesn't matter where anybody was taught from, you're going to find this consistency where you believe there's some kind of supreme being, and there's some kind of afterlife, and there's some kind of moral code. If you start to look at this, it kind of starts to speak loudly that what your soul is craving, God's providing. Look at number 4. Most cultures explain previous human history by their faith viewpoint. We look at what's happened in the world around us and we explain it by our faith viewpoint. So if we look at the previous human history, it's always important to go like in history in light of what do people believe. Because what people believe is what drives them on the daily basis. This is the last one. Most cultures understand then God has a specific way of relating to human beings. That God, the God of the universe, has a way of relating to us. That it isn't just God wound up a watch and let us go. It isn't that God just said, I got you started, now go have fun. He says, I want to be involved in your world. Now, they all come together. All of those things. And when they come together, that helps you to understand that, man, your soul craving probably takes you out of the chemical world, and it probably takes you out of the power world, the energy world, and it takes you maybe out of the world of just God getting to us getting to God. What if it takes us to the world of God getting to us, which is Christ, which is God wanting a relationship? All that's being craved by most cultures in the world leads us to our soul connecting with God. It's interesting. Look at Roman numeral 3. Some soldiers choose the spiritual rebirth experience through belief in Christ's sacrificial death. Some of us as warriors, choose to connect with Jesus Christ that brings that relationship very, very much alive. It's that longing during those times when we're in pain that so often goes with us that we go, is there more than this? In We Are Marshall, there's a scene in a chapel that I want you to think about. You're going to find the new coach is there, and Red Dawson is there, and Red is wondering about the meaning of life. Where do you go when everybody's died? And he ends up in this chapel just trying to think, who is God? When the new coach talks to him, he talks to him about ways of thinking that are just so amazing. He goes, all my life, I've thought that winning is everything. I've always told my teams, winning is everything, until now. Now, just playing the game is everything. If we just show up, and if we get through, and maybe someday, maybe somehow down the road, years from now, maybe winning will be what we're all about. But today it's just about playing the game. And in the presence of God, in that environment, this issue of our soul rises as these guys consider, what is life about? Is it really about winning? No. It's about playing the game. Why are you playing the game? Because there's something bigger going on. Consider the statement that goes with that, Roman numeral 3. It says this, these warriors, when their spirit is reconnected to God, will discover several things. Here's what you're going to discover when you're reconnected to God. And there's a cool list. I'm going to kind of walk through this quickly for you. We'll understand forgiveness for their shadow behavior. Forgiveness for their shadow behavior. See, what has to happen is we have to break the pattern of, remember, I've taken away my spirit and added the shadow. God says, I'm going to forgive that. That's what Christ does on the cross. He pays for our sin, our shadow. 2, guidance for making the right decisions during their forest walk. This will allow you to now have guidance to make the right decisions going forward in your walk in the journey of life. Then instead of us always going wrong, the shadow dies or comes under control as the spirit comes alive and starts to drive who we are. And so we start making better choices. Look at the next one. Number 3. Help in actualizing their giftedness and potential. We've been talking about that. It's going to help you actualize, help you underline that, and your potential. This is going to help you take you to the next level. Why? You're connected to the God of the universe who's making you all that night you're supposed to be, all that impact you're supposed to have. Number 4, inspiration as their personal calling is understood. All of a sudden you get real excited about life because now you know why you're around. All of a sudden you get inspired to live and take others with you on the journey, and life takes on a much fuller basis. When you connect to Christ, who connects you to God, your spirit comes alive, and that journey takes on a very different track. Look at number 5. Strength in time of temptation and struggle with the shadow. Now, the shadow doesn't ever go away. What happens is it gets beat by Christ when he rose from the dead, but it's still part of us until we die. So it will always fight against us. What this does is suddenly allow us to have this ability to fight against the shadow. Now, remember the core, right? Core is body, soul, mind, spirit, and the ability to make a choice, self. But there's another problem here. You got the shadow that's still here. You have to take all of that into consideration as you make choices as a knight. Next one. Number 6. Principles that assist him in making proper self-evaluations and interpersonal judgments. This is going to give you new principles of your life that are going to help you make choices that make all the difference in the world. When you get here, well, you go to a new level of freedom, a new level of ability just to move forward. Look at the next one. Divine support and comfort. God's going to be with you wherever. This last one is so huge. He will give you divine support and comfort. You know the President of the United States that used God in his speeches more than any other president as far as we can tell to date? His name is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's an interesting guy. He was a man who had a sense of justice from an early age. One day he saw some kids torturing a turtle, and he wrote a paper about it while he was still in elementary school. By the age of 17, he is walking 17 miles one way to see lawyers argue their case because he's so fascinated by that. When he worked in a store and somebody was shorted 6 cents, he walked several miles to pay him back their 6 cents. Abraham Lincoln was a very interesting moral man. He had a real desire. His relationship with God has all kinds of stuff that makes it hard to figure out exactly where Abraham Lincoln fell in his journey, but he believed that God would interact with him and he could interact with God. So much so that Abraham Lincoln did amazing things in his lifetime. Whether you know it or not, he will die just a few days after the end of the Civil War. Let me give you the history leading up to that. When he's 25, he's an Illinois legislator. By the age of 27, he's passed the bar. By 37, he's a one-term U.S. House of Representative. And by the time he's 49, he will lose his opportunity to become a senator to those famous Douglas debates. But by the time he's 51, he becomes the Republican president of the United States. He will then be involved in, by the age of 54, in freeing the slaves in the Emancipation Proclamation. His entire tenure is with the Civil War going on around him. And upon the end of the Civil War, 6 days later, at the age of 56, he died. Let me give you a quote from Abraham Lincoln that tells you a great deal about his heart. It says this, "And having thus chosen our course, without guile and with pure purpose, let us renew our trust in God and go forward without fear and with manly hearts." You know what's interesting? In that quote, he says, "My soul has taken me to a higher place. My soul has taken me to a place where I get that the war that I'm engaged in, whether that's the war against our own brothers in a civil war, whether it's a war against slavery, whether it's a war against evil, whatever it is, in order to get to the peace, I got to be willing to battle through." Your soul will drive you to that. In a scene from We Are Marshall, there's this moment where it's before the only game, they'll win 2 games their first year after the great crash. What happens in that game is just before it's played, the coach will bring all the guys to a memorial, which is a memorial for 6 of the players whose bodies were so badly damaged they could not distinguish who they were. So there their bodies were. He takes them to the memorial, and he says, "Gentlemen, our opponent is bigger than us, better than us. And for all intents and purposes, they should win. However, they don't know your heart. They don't know that here today the funeral ends, and we begin to be remembered for something new again." There is just this amazing moment. Whether or not that scene or not is something that resonates in your soul, it resonates in mine. It's that great moment when we realize we can rise out of the ashes. We can rise out of this great tragedy because our soul connects us to the God of the universe who allows us to see things very, very different. So, gentlemen, you have a soul. Don't ignore it. Part of being a warrior is the courage to go explore it and see where it leads you. For me, it leads me to a relationship with God through Christ. For you, I encourage you to seek Him, because God says all who seek Him will find Him. Talk to you later.